This is not about becoming colder. It is about becoming expensive. If people keep using you, it is not because they are cruel. It is because the system you are operating in has learned something about you. It has learned that your time is flexible, that your energy is accessible, that your effort arrives before it is earned. And systems, once trained, do not stop on their own. They extract until there is nothing left to take. Most men never confront this directly. They tell themselves stories instead. That they are generous, that they are loyal, that being helpful is virtuous. These stories are comforting, but they hide a more uncomfortable truth. You are being consumed because you have not defined a cost. And what has no cost has no limit. This video is not for men who want to be kinder. It is for men who are tired of being quietly depleted. Tired of being reliable without being respected. Tired of watching others build lives, leverage, and authority using pieces of their time and effort, while they remain stuck in place, praised but unchanged. Here is the threat you need to understand before we continue. The world does not reward helpers. It rewards builders. Helpers stabilize systems. Builders reshape them. Helpers are appreciated until they are expected. Builders are resisted until they are undeniable. And once a man crosses from one category to the other, there is no applause. There is only distance. If you are constantly available, constantly fixing, constantly supporting, something is being learned about you. Not consciously, but structurally. People learn that your boundaries are negotiable, that your yes comes easily, that your time bends to their urgency. And once that lesson is absorbed, reversing it feels like betrayal to those who benefited. This is why setting boundaries later feels dangerous. Not because boundaries are wrong, but because you are changing the terms of an unspoken agreement. An agreement you never signed, but have been honoring for years. The shift we are talking about here is not cosmetic. It is not about saying no more often while staying the same inside. It is about integrating the part of you that you were taught to suppress. The part that is decisive, territorial, protective of its time. The part that understands cost and enforces it without apology. Many call this part a monster. That word is inaccurate, but revealing. It is labeled dangerous because it disrupts comfort. It refuses exploitation. It does not explain itself endlessly. And when integrated correctly, it does not seek dominance. It simply refuses to be used. Most men keep this part locked away because they fear what will happen if they access it. They fear becoming harsh. They fear losing relationships. They fear being seen as selfish. What they do not realize is that suppressing this part does not make them moral. It makes them porous. Porous men leak time, energy, and focus. Builders do not. If this resonates, it means you have likely lived in the helper role for a long time. You are the one people call when things break, when deadlines approach, when emotional labor is required. You are trusted, relied upon, leaned on. And yet, when it comes time to build something of your own, the room is suddenly empty. This is not an accident. It is the cost of being useful without being bounded. The boundary shift we are exploring is not about aggression. It is about pricing. Builders understand that time is not something you give away freely. It is something you allocate, something you protect, something that demands a return, whether in respect, progress, or leverage. The moment you stop functioning as a helper by default, the system reacts. Some people push harder. Some guilt you. Some test whether this new posture is real. And some quietly step back, having lost interest now that extraction is no longer easy. This reaction is the first signal that the shift is working. You must understand this clearly. People do not use you because you are weak. They use you because you are unguarded. You have strength, capacity, intelligence, and discipline. That is why you were targeted in the first place. Builders are not drained because they lack generosity. They are protected because they have boundaries. The danger is attempting this shift externally before it happens internally. Saying no while still feeling guilty. Setting limits while still craving approval. This creates tension that leaks out in tone, posture, and inconsistency. The system senses this and waits you out. True integration happens when you no longer need to justify your limits. When you stop explaining why your time matters. When you stop proving your worth through availability. At that point, boundaries are not enforced, they are assumed. This is where the monster stops being a threat and becomes an asset. Not a source of rage, but of structure. It gives weight to your decisions, finality to your words. It transforms you from someone who reacts to needs into someone who builds toward outcomes. Most men never make this transition. They remain helpful their entire lives and call it virtue. But beneath that virtue is often fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of conflict, fear of standing alone without usefulness as a shield. Builders accept that standing alone is part of the cost. This video will not teach you how to become cold. It will show you how to become solid, how to stop leaking value, how to integrate strength without becoming destructive, and how to shift from being consumed to being consulted. If this unsettles you, that is not a flaw. It means you are close to a threshold you have been circling for years. Because once a man commands a price for his time, the world treats him differently. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, structurally. And if this resonates, understand this now. You were never meant to be endlessly helpful. You were meant to build something that could not use you up. Every system assigns value based on resistance, not on intention, not on effort. Resistance. What pushes back shapes behavior. What does not is reshaped, redirected, and eventually depleted. This is not a moral observation. It is a structural one. And it applies to energy, labor, attention, and time with equal force. Helpers offer low resistance. Builders do not. This is why boundaries feel unnatural at first. They introduce friction where there was none. They interrupt flow. They force others to slow down and reconsider how they approach you. And friction always exposes truth. It reveals who respected you and who simply benefited from you. Most men are taught to associate boundaries with selfishness. They are conditioned to believe that being needed equals being valuable. This creates a dangerous inversion. Instead of value producing demand, demand is mistaken for value. The more people need you, the more important you feel. Until you realize that being needed is not the same as being respected. Respect requires limits. Time, more than any other resource, reveals this law. Time cannot be replenished. It cannot be borrowed without cost. And yet, most men give it away as if it were infinite. They respond immediately. They show up by default. They absorb other people's urgency and treat it as their own. In doing so, they signal something powerful and damaging. Their time has no price. Builders think differently. They understand that time must be protected before it can be invested. They do not react to need. They respond to alignment. They do not solve problems automatically. They decide which problems are worth solving. This shift terrifies systems built on access. When you stop being available on demand, others must confront their own dependency. They must either increase the value they bring to the interaction or move on. Both outcomes serve you. Stillness plays a critical role here. A man without boundaries is in constant motion. He is always adjusting, accommodating, compensating. A man with boundaries is slower. He pauses. He considers. He lets silence sit between request and response. That silence is not empty. It is evaluative. It communicates that access is not guaranteed. This is why many people become uncomfortable when you do not answer immediately. Their discomfort is not about you. It is about the loss of control. They are no longer certain where they stand, and uncertainty forces respect where familiarity once dissolved it. There is an old strategic principle that power accumulates where energy is conserved. The man who disperses himself everywhere never consolidates force. The man who focuses his effort behind clear boundaries becomes dense. His actions carry more consequence because they are rarer. His yes means more because it is harder to obtain. This is the economic law of the soul. Scarcity increases value. Oversupply destroys it. The monster you are integrating is not aggression. It is enforcement. It is the part of you that says no without apology, that does not negotiate with guilt, that does not trade self-respect for approval. This part is frightening only because it has been absent for so long. When integrated correctly, it does not lash out. It does not intimidate. It simply refuses. And refusal, when consistent, is transformative. Many men attempt to adopt boundaries tactically. They memorize phrases. They delay responses artificially. They copy behaviors without internal alignment. This fails because boundaries are not techniques. They are outcomes of self-valuation. If you do not believe your time matters, no script will convince the world otherwise. Builders do not argue for their worth. They behave as if it is already priced in. They structure their lives accordingly. Their calendars reflect priorities. Their energy is allocated intentionally. Their presence is selective. This selectivity is often misinterpreted as coldness. It is not. It is clarity. Clarity about what deserves effort and what does not. Clarity about which relationships are reciprocal and which are extractive. Clarity about the difference between being supportive and being consumed. When you stop acting as a helper by default, something subtle happens. People begin to prepare before approaching you. Requests become more thoughtful. Expectations become more realistic. And some people stop asking altogether. Not because you are unkind, but because the cost has changed. This is the boundary shift. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is felt in tone, in timing, in posture, in the way you no longer rush to fill gaps or fix problems that are not yours. Over time, the world reorganizes around this new structure, and you begin to experience something rare: respect without exhaustion. This foundation must be understood before we move further, because the next phase is not about how others respond to your boundaries. It is about how you handle the isolation that follows, the quiet, the reduction, the space where your old identity no longer fits. That is where most men turn back. The transition from helper to builder does not announce itself. There is no moment where the world claps and acknowledges the change. The signs arrive quietly, often disguised as loss. Fewer messages, less casual reliance, more space. And for a time, that space feels unsettling, as if something has gone wrong. It hasn't. The first sign is that requests begin to change in tone. People stop assuming your availability. They ask instead of expect. They provide context instead of urgency. This shift is subtle but profound. It signals that your time is no longer treated as a public resource. It is being approached as something that requires consideration. The second sign is internal. You feel less rushed, even when doing more meaningful work. Your nervous system is no longer calibrated to other people's emergencies. You can sit with unanswered messages without anxiety. Silence no longer feels like neglect. It feels like alignment. This calm is not apathy. It is ownership. The third sign is resistance. Some people push back against your boundaries. They test them. They frame your refusal as a personality change, as distance, as a lack of care. This is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that the old system is trying to restore itself. Extraction always resists regulation. The fourth sign is that praise decreases while respect increases. Helpers are often praised loudly because praise is cheap. Builders are respected quietly because respect carries weight. You may notice fewer affirmations, fewer expressions of gratitude. In their place, you'll see adjustments. People plan better. They waste less of your time. They think before engaging. The fifth sign is that your work begins to compound. Builders do not scatter effort, they channel it. With boundaries in place, energy that was once leaked into maintenance tasks is redirected toward creation. Projects deepen, skills sharpen, outcomes accumulate. You are no longer busy, you are productive. And others can feel the difference, even if they cannot articulate it. The sixth sign is a change in how conflict appears. When you were a helper, conflict often came indirectly, through guilt, through pressure, through emotional leverage. As a builder, conflict becomes cleaner. People state what they want, or they disengage. There is less manipulation because there is less access. And less access eliminates many forms of control. The seventh sign is the most disorienting. You begin to realize how much of your identity was built around being needed. When that need fades, there is a void. Not of purpose, but of habit. You are no longer reinforced by constant requests. You must generate meaning internally. This is where many men stumble. They mistake the absence of demand for a lack of value. It is the opposite. What you are experiencing is self-authorship. Your worth is no longer mirrored back to you by others' dependence. It is anchored in what you are building. And builders do not require constant confirmation. At this stage, some men attempt to recreate usefulness artificially. They over-offer again. They loosen boundaries. They check in unnecessarily. This regression is subtle and easy to rationalize, but it carries a cost. The system notices. Respect erodes quickly when boundaries fluctuate. Consistency is everything. Another sign emerges over time. Your presence becomes directional. When you enter a situation, things move. Not faster, but forward. Because you are no longer diffused, you are focused. People sense that you are not there to maintain comfort. You are there to produce outcomes. This changes how they engage with you. You may also notice that fewer people have access to your inner world. This is not emotional shutdown. It is filtration. Not everyone deserves proximity. Builders share selectively because intimacy, like time, has cost. This reduction can feel lonely. But loneliness here is not absence, it is compression. Fewer connections, more depth. Fewer conversations, more substance. The noise fades. What remains is signal. One final sign is the disappearance of resentment. Helpers often carry unspoken resentment because they give more than they receive. Builders do not. They give intentionally. They invest where return is possible. And because of this, they do not feel drained by contribution. They feel strengthened by it. If these signs feel familiar, understand what they mean. You are no longer operating as a resource for others to consume freely. You are becoming a structure others must adapt to. This is not dominance. It is self-respect made visible. And with visibility comes consequence. Because once you stop being endlessly useful, you must be prepared for what falls away. That is what comes next. The boundary shift does not end with respect. It ends with separation. And this is the part most men are not prepared for. When you stop being endlessly available, you stop fitting into certain roles. Roles that were comfortable. Roles that felt familiar. Roles that rewarded you with appreciation, but never with advancement. Once you become a builder, some relationships cannot follow. Not because you have become difficult, but because they were built on access, not alignment. When access is removed, the foundation collapses quietly. There is no confrontation, no dramatic fallout, just distance. This distance can feel like punishment if you are still measuring your worth through proximity. It can feel like loss if you confuse usefulness with connection. But in reality, it is clarification. The system is shedding what cannot exist under new conditions. This is why this mindset must be used with caution. There is no applause for enforcing boundaries. There is no ceremony for integrating strength. There is no validation for becoming less consumable. In fact, there is often suspicion, silence, a subtle withdrawal from those who once relied on you heavily. And if you are not anchored internally, this can pull you back into old patterns. Weak men experience this and conclude that boundaries are selfish. They revert. They reopen access. They offer explanations. They soften limits. And in doing so, they reinforce the original dynamic even more deeply than before. The system learns that resistance is temporary. Strong men experience the same discomfort and hold steady. Not rigidly, not angrily, simply consistently. They allow the consequences to unfold without interference. They do not chase what drifts away. They do not punish those who leave. They continue building. This is the difference. Another consequence is responsibility. Builders cannot hide behind chaos. When you are no longer reacting to others' needs, you are accountable for how you use your reclaimed time. There is no one to blame for stagnation, no external urgency to mask avoidance. The space you create demands intention. This is where the integrated monster reveals its true purpose. Not destruction, but protection. It guards your focus. It enforces priorities. It prevents you from bleeding energy into low-return interactions. It is not loud. It does not threaten. It simply closes doors that no longer serve the structure you are building. If you misuse this mindset, it will isolate you unnecessarily. If you wield boundaries as weapons, you will provoke resistance. If you treat people as costs instead of collaborators, you will become brittle. This is not the goal. The goal is alignment. Builders are not antisocial. They are selective. They do not reject connection. They reject exploitation. They do not hoard time. They invest it. And because they invest carefully, their presence carries weight when it appears. You must also accept that some people will rewrite your story once you stop serving them. They will say you changed, that you became distant, that you lost something. Let them. Narrative control is not your responsibility. Structure is. One final warning. Once you integrate this shift, you cannot return to being a helper without cost. You will see too clearly. You will feel the drain too quickly. Pretending not to notice will erode self-respect faster than any external pressure ever could. This is not a mindset for those who want to be needed. It is for those who want to build something that lasts. Something that does not rely on their exhaustion to function. Something that can stand without constant maintenance. Mass changes landscapes, whether it intends to or not. When you integrate boundaries, you become heavier, slower to move, harder to redirect. The world adjusts accordingly. Some paths narrow, others open. And what remains is not applause, but structure, the kind that cannot use you up.